Good morning, everyone. My name is Graham Harrison. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk to you on the subject of cybersecurity, preparedness, attack, rapid recovery, and how to strengthen defences. And I'm going to hand over to Dr. McKenzie from CryptoCloud to pick up the baton for the second half of the talk. So by way of introduction, I'm Graham Harrison. I'm the Group Director of IT, Information Management and Projects at the Lincoln College Group. And on the 21st of December to around 8 p.m, Lincoln College came under a sophisticated, sustained and very clever cyber attack, which turned out to be from the Sodini group, who are an organised criminal gang that operate from St. Petersburg in Russia. So it wasn't some amateur hack or an attempt to find out of interest what a group of hackers could get access to. It was an attempt to extort and a criminal attempt, and a very clever attack. No data was exfiltrated or stolen from the attack, but our network infection was widespread, and it required a total rebuild of the IT infrastructure platform from scratch. So from absolutely nothing, we had to put the network infrastructure back. Now, on the 9th of December, which was just 17 days after the attack, all of the core services have been restored and made available to the students and staff. And that included a full restore of 83 servers, 1,600 computers, desktop computers across 5 disparate sites have been completely wiped and re-imaged. 1,000 staff passwords have been reset, and all of the communication engagement work to make sure those staff had their new passwords, including a call center setup for that. 5,000 student passwords have been reset. We'd also implemented a brand new advanced threat protection capability, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in the coming slides. 8 of our major systems have had significant changes to improve their resilience to cyber attack in the future, and all of our reporting obligations, including to the Information Commissioner's Office, to the insurer, the SFA, the OFS, our legal team, the police, Interpol, all of those reporting obligations have been fully delivered. And that gave rise to 3 questions, which I thought you might be interested to find out a bit more about. That's: how did we get hit? How did we recover so quickly? Because 17 days is a fast recovery for such a serious attack. And what measures would you like to consider in order to stay safe yourselves? So in terms of how we got hit, so this wheel shows the stages in layman's terms that a hacker will go through, or a group will go through, to get access to systems. Now, it starts where an attacker tries to get, or certainly in the case of ours, an attacker gains entry by getting a password to remote access. A lot of colleges are working remotely, and it's much easier to attack home PCs than computers in a college network. And it can be very unsophisticated. It can be getting a password. It can be genuinely registering as a student and being allocated a password for an online course, or it can be stealing a password from other sites, because we all tend to use the same passwords for different sites, and then working out that the person on abc.com is the same user that works at this college, and getting on that way. But once they're on, they will start to quietly reconnoitre and observe your systems to learn more about them without alerting anyone to the fact that they have gained access. They then move on to finding out about any weaknesses, because no IT network is perfect. And they do something called permission escalation on the quiet, which gets them a higher and higher level of access to the systems. They then set about spreading software that they can use to make an attack all over the network. And then step number 5, when they're ready, they will launch a lightning strike to encrypt files and documents. By encrypt, we mean convert them into gobbledygook, so you can't read your Word documents, your PowerPoints, your payroll data, your HR data. It'll all be scrambled, and they will leave a series of electronic ransom notes where they claim that on payment they will give you the data back. So those are the 7 stages, and that's in layman's terms. So the next question I'd like to explore is how did Lincoln College manage to recover so quickly? And I've thought a lot about this, and these are the components that I identified. So firstly, staffing. It is really important to invest in high-end, high-expertise IT staff, because the hacking groups have got the resources to recruit technically very competent people, unfortunately. So we need to counter that by having the best technical people we can find for our IT units. So ongoing staffing development. Another reason we managed to get back so quickly, in my view, is senior leadership buy-in and the relationship between the senior technology management and the executive leadership team, and having a technology representative directly on the LT. Investment is another key aspect. So investment is difficult. We're living in resource-constrained times, but certainly at Lincoln College, over the years, when we have managed to secure some investment for IT, we've always put it into the servers, the networks, the storage, the unglamorous back office stuff that means that the foundations are strong, even if we haven't had as much investment as we wanted to replace the front end. We've focused on the things behind the scenes. Enterprise-grade backups, very important. I'll talk a bit more about those in the coming slides, but there's any range of backups available for colleges. On the one hand of the spectrum there, you can get free backups. On the other hand, you can pay 6 figures for a backup, and clearly a backup system that costs 100K is going to be a lot more resilient than one that's free, especially when it comes to the day when you need to restore it and apply it to get all your data back. Another thing that we had in place was a disaster recovery plan, and that sounds obvious, but it is quite often the case that people don't consider how to respond, how to recover from absolute zero. Now, on the day when you can't get at any servers anywhere, not even your backup server to apply a restore, how can you recover from nothing? You need to have that plan in place. Cyber security insurance goes without saying. You need a good policy in place, a specialist policy, because you will access it if you ever have to deal with an attack. A cybersecurity partner, do you have an established commercial relationship with a credible external partner? Because you need to have a working relationship in place with someone, with a company that has this expertise as its core competency, because unfortunately we can't be experts at everything. And centralized IT systems, very important. If you've got very mature IT systems, it means you'll be in a position to roll out the re-imaging of 1,600 desktop computers from the center without having to visit every one. It means you'll be able to reset 6,000 passwords from a central office. So you've got to have mature centralized IT systems. So if all those things are in place, you know, I've come to thinking that it's the planning that you put into your IT systems in the 3 years before a cyber attack that will determine how successful the 3 weeks immediately following it are, and whether you can get back in that amount of time or not. So the question, what amount of time should it take to recover? The answer is it depends. If you have all those things in place I've got on this slide, then it is possible that you could be back and running in under a week. If your IT is exceptionally well run, but you haven't got all of that, I think 3 to 4 weeks. We happen to know that some educational institutions that have been hit have been out for several months, or have not recovered fully several months down the line. And even in some cases, especially if the enterprise backups aren't in, or if they're proved not to be tested and they don't work, you may be in the stage where some things you just can never recover, and you have to start from scratch. Also worth mentioning that the maximum fine from the Information Commissioner's Office is 4% of turnover, or £17.5 million, whichever is greater, so that there is a financial impact beyond the loss of business that can accrue. And recovering quickly, although it's on everyone's mind after it happens, it's no substitute for recovering safely and permanently, and potentially some brave decision making will be required about things that you want to do differently, or features that you will want to take away in order to be safe. And you know, during the time you're out, you won't be able to run a payroll, you can't submit an ILR, you can't pay your suppliers, send an email, make a phone call, start a Teams call. print or copy anything, or write or read an office document. So those are the implications whilst you're out, and that's how you can get back the things you need to take into account to get back quickly. Now, at Lincoln College, we had a lot of those things in place, but we didn't have something in place called advanced threat protection, which I do want to spend a couple of minutes talking about. So traditional antivirus software works by knowing the shape of which piece of software you're being attacked with and stopping it. Advanced threat protection works differently. It's something more modern, more recent, and it works by detecting the patterns, the behaviors of an attacker rather than the tools they're using, and very quickly closing them down. And the analogy I use, if you imagine your system is a castle with an outer wall and a moat, the antivirus software keeps the attackers from getting over the wall, but once they're in and running towards the keep, the advanced threat protection can grab hold of them and isolate them and stop them from doing any damage. So in my view, there are 3 levels of protection that you need to have in place. The traditional IT security is all of the standard kind of security and IT-led initiatives like good username and password hygiene, regularly changing your passwords, multi-factor authentication, taking a call on your mobile as you're logging in to make sure it's really you, good permissions control, all that kind of traditional IT security stuff is the first plank you need in place. The advanced threat protection is this new capability I've just described, which is an additional layer of, certainly it's more cost, it's more sophisticated and complex, and it's much better. It vastly improves the probability that you will not be damaged when an attack happens. But also, even with advanced threat protection in place, you need the ability, the planned ability to be able to recover from absolute zero when there's nothing left. And that was the state we were in the first day that we came in after the attack to deal with it and to get back on our feet. So if you ask an IT person, you need to restore all the servers, where would you start? They might say, well, I get my recovery plan off the network and I'd run up my backup server and I'd apply my backups. But actually, if you're recovering from zero, you can't get at your backup server because it's not available. And your plan, if it's stored on the network, you won't be able to retrieve that either. So there's a lot of extra thinking you have to do to answer the question, how do I recover from absolute zero? And if you've got those 3 planks in place, then my view is that is a very good level of protection. It doesn't necessarily stop, it's no guarantee that you won't get attacked, but each one of those planks, as you follow them from the left to the right, sort of drastically reduces the probability of A, getting hit in the first place, and B, your ability to stop it in enough time before it's done any damage. So I'd like to move on to explore what questions senior leaders, principals, CEOs, and senior technical leaders should be asking of their technical teams to build a level of confidence that you're in a good place to minimize the probability of an attack happening and being successful. So I would start by asking, do we have a comprehensive cyber insurance policy in place? And is it a specialist policy? It should be specific and not part of a wider disaster recovery policy, because you will access all the features of a specialist policy if the day comes, including access to their specialist teams and their insurance teams. And certainly we found them to be a great help. So another good question to ask is, are we absolutely sure, are we absolutely certain that our backups are immune to cyber attack? Now, some commercial firms, we've read some case studies where a hacker managed to get in, encrypt the data, and also find the backups and encrypt the backups as well. And then that firm is in real trouble because there's no way to restore. So it's a good thing to really check out with the technical teams and the backup suppliers, are your backups immune to attack? And the sort of things you would look for are a backup system that encrypts the backups already using some proprietary encryption technology. And also backups can be in a state, something called immutable, where they can't be changed. But those questions you need to probe to make sure that the backup is immune to cyber attack and it will work. So my next question, if we come in to work on Monday and all the IT systems are destroyed, do we have a documented plan to get back from absolute zero? Have we thought about it, or did the plan get destroyed as well? That's a good question to ask. Another question I would explore is what percentage of turnover is ring-fenced for cybersecurity related spend? It's a difficult question. It's not black and white, but certainly I don't think the answer should be zero. I think there should be some ring-fenced budget, and doing a bit of looking around the sector and what I now know about cybersecurity, I would say about 0.5% of turnover for a college and maybe 1% of turnover for a university. But you would need to explore that in more detail in the context of your own organisations. So my next question, have the security and prevention measures of the internal IT team been externally critiqued by industry experts? And that's not to say we don't trust our IT team, it's just that two views are better than one, and we do need to engage with external experts to make sure that we have a good answer to that question. So my next question I would ask, do we have an advanced threat protection capability? And I don't just mean a piece of software like an antivirus checker. I mean engaging with an organisation to give you the software and the capability to monitor it, which is something that Rona will talk a bit more about in the second half of the presentation. Which leads on to my next question. Do we have a trusted and capable external cybersecurity partner, and are we engaging with them openly and transparently? Because we want them to know about any weaknesses, to find them and to resolve them. And we don't want to be, we want to be fully open and transparent with a trusted partner that has got credentials. So moving on to my next question, do we have a credible level of audit and certification? This isn't a catch-all because we had Cyber Essentials Plus in place when we were attacked and we still got attacked, but certainly some level of audit and certification, and asking who provides that accreditation and what are their credentials is another good question to ask. So my last question that I would pose are regular cybersecurity briefings being presented to the executive leadership team and to the board? Because ultimately, if data's stolen, if it's put on the dark web, if there's a fine, if your systems aren't available for 2 months, it is the board that are responsible and accountable. And I find that having regular briefings to both the executive leadership team and the board really helps to focus both the knowledge sharing, awareness of where you're at the moment and what steps have been taken at the most senior levels, which in my view is very important. So to conclude my part of the presentation, Lincoln College are working with CryptoCloud, and Rona's going to talk to you about that in a moment. We're looking to augment the standards advanced threat protection by providing the capability to train level 4 cyber security technologist apprentices that can kind of come as part of the package, because if you are in a place where you're using advanced threat protection, you're finding so much out about any potential weaknesses on your IT network, you need additional capability to be closing them down every day. So that concludes my part of the presentation. I hope you found it interesting. I'm now going to hand you over to Dr. Rona McKenzie, who's going to take you through the second part. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Graham. Good morning. My name is Rona McKenzie, and I'm speaking to you today on behalf of CryptoCloud. CryptoCloud, as Graham said, is the college's cyber partner, and we are an independent cyber operations and intelligence company. Established in 2016, we operate 24/7 from our Cyber Intelligence Centre in Lincoln, and we provide cyber operations and consultancy services to a global portfolio of clients, ranging all the way from SMEs through to global organisations in the private, public and the third sector. We support organisations in a wide variety of industry sectors, and for example, they'll include renewables, pharmaceuticals, education, defence, health, legal and logistics, to name but a few. Importantly for today, my background is that I spent 20 years working in education across 7 different local authorities in England in a wide variety of teaching and leadership roles. Most recently, I was the founding principal of Lincoln University Technical College and an Ofsted inspector, though please don't hold that against me. I'm speaking to you today with a foot in both camps as an understanding college principal, and also with an appreciation of the risks posed today by cyber attackers. Thanks, Graham. I'll be honest, when I finished my headship in early 2018, cybersecurity was not high on my radar. I was more concerned about quality of teaching, curriculum developments, examination outcomes, recruiting key staff in shortage subjects, the myriad of things that college principals have to contend with on a daily basis. And my IT knowledge was limited, and I relied on the specialist knowledge of my team. So when I moved into industry in 2018, I was shocked to learn by the end of 2019, 4 out of 5 education providers had been attacked in the previous 12 months. And that pace of attack grew. In September 2020, you'll know that the National Cybersecurity Centre issued an alert that devastating cyber attacks against education providers were spiking. And you'll know from reading the press that there's been a growing problem since then. Interestingly, education is now the 9th highest sector for cyber attacks worldwide. IBM identified that the average cost of a breach to an education provider is £3.1 million. Last year in 2020, on average, it took 280 days to identify and contain a breach. And so Graham's experience at the college is unusual, that they were able to return to business so quickly. And we know that's because of the myriad of elements that Graham mentioned and his relationship with the cloud. This month, we've learned that there is a cyber attack every 11 seconds. And so we know that the statistics speak for themselves. And collectively, we believe that we do not need to ignore them. We need to very much be acting now. Otherwise, we are failing to prepare. Thanks, Graham. You heard Graham's description of the Lincoln College cyber attack, and it is harrowing. The impact of a breach is much greater than we might imagine. When I talk to colleagues across a number of different sectors, but particularly in education, there can be an over-reliance on cyber insurance as a solution, and Graham touched on this. Our analogy is that if we relate that to car insurance, it's a bit like paying your premium, but then thinking it'll be all right if you drive badly or leave the car unlocked on the street at night with the door open, lend it to other people to borrow. And we simply wouldn't do that with our vehicles. And so we mustn't now leave our most precious digital assets free for attackers to interrogate. Graham touched on a number of elements in the college that were affected by their cyber breach. And you'll see on the screen now a few icons representing some of those areas that you might not have picked up. Things like the CCTV going down, building access swipe card systems not working, catering facilities, gym facilities, no phones, not unable to contact anyone. And that disaster recovery plan that's sitting on the server is suddenly not accessible at that moment in time. As an ex-inspector, I'm curious on the impact on future Ofsted inspection outcomes were our education providers to be breached. But most importantly, I think, are 2 elements. One is on reputational damage, both locally, nationally and internationally, and so therefore the impact on your future student recruitment. But in my mind, more concerning is the impact on the well-being of your staff and of your students, something that we can't put a price on. So in the next slide, we're going to have a little look at a very brief cyber action plan that we've created together. Graham's put together some really interesting questions to pose at a senior leadership level, and we think we can structure those within this short cyber action plan. I work for Crypto Cloud, and so of course I would say this, but we know as much as we realise we know. What we don't know is what we don't know, and that might seem a bit gobbledygook and odd, but I knew nothing about cyber security until last year, and I'm learning it's a highly complex place, and it's not a static environment, it's constantly moving and developing. I talk to lots of IT network specialists who themselves say they're not cyber specialists. And so that's why it's so important to find a trusted cybersecurity partner, someone that you can work with who explains the risks and remediations in a language that is understood equally by the senior leadership team who may not be IT experts, and equally by your IT expert team. We always start with an audit when we work with any organisation. Ours is called Cobra, and in a few moments we'll show you a video that gives you the main points of that audit process. We see organisations who, like the college, have followed SFA requirements and secured Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus. And unfortunately, some then do assume that they will be safe from attacks. But as Graham pointed out, it isn't true, and that audit is insufficient. a much more in-depth audit, which really interrogates your systems and processes, identifies the strengths and vulnerabilities, is the first step to keeping an organisation safe. Now, I'm aware of the numerous audits we're required to do in education, and at times they can feel like tick box processes to get to the next level. And this is where that's not the case at all. It's a deeply embedded plan of action. And so we would use our audit outcomes to create an improvement plan. I know that money in education is a challenge, but this will need commitment of time and money and expertise. And so therefore, it's really important to understand your appetite for risk and the amount of money that you can and are able to invest in cybersecurity, so that you can then consider how you will develop your resilience over a period of time. The threat landscape evolves really rapidly, so it's important to test regularly. Ideally, as Graham pointed out, using your external partner, as they'll have the most up-to-date information on current threats. And that will allow you to identify vulnerabilities and put into plan steps to resolve them. As Graham said, checking the disaster recovery plan, I think mine had everything for fires and floods, and I thought everything but the kitchen sink that may be relevant, and I'll hand on heart say that cyber attack didn't appear on my disaster recovery plan. And if it doesn't on yours, now is the time to be talking to someone like my colleague Paul to look at how you would set one up yourselves. I've spent quite a bit of time recently talking to college principals and providers around their insurance, their cyber insurance, looking at the fine print. And I would suggest now pulling your policy out to have a look. We are hearing that policies might point out that they can cover up to £500,000 in costs, but what we're finding is the amount that you can actually claim for is lower. Whether, depending on certain policies, it may just cover actions needed to stop the attack and not remediation, and those figures are very different, so it is worth having a close look at the fine print. We know that our staff are either a fantastic line of extra defence or a potentially big risk to your cybersecurity. So training being in CPD programmes is very, very important. We offer bespoke training platforms to help our businesses and organisations teach their staff the current threats and understand what to look out for. And of course, it's not standing still, this landscape. So evolving and iterating is really important. So I mentioned that there's a video that shows our Cobra audit, and I think Graham's just going to play it for you now.
All businesses have a responsibility to protect against unauthorized access to their data and assets. With cyber threats and ransomware attacks on the rise, it has never been more important to understand your organization's cyber risk. Cobra, Crypto Cloud's cyber operational business risk audit, is comprised of 4 unique Crypto Cloud developed programs created to reinforce industry-leading cybersecurity frameworks with special focus on risk management and security operations controls based on the IASME governance framework. With Cobra, you receive an instant understanding of your business's cyber risk exposure levels. Phase 1, Reconnaissance. The Cobra audit measures your business's ability to prevent and protect against future cyber attacks. Phase 2, Vulnerability Scanning. The Cobra process includes a crypto scan that runs against all client internet-facing infrastructure, culminating in a surface attack score, which outlines known external vulnerabilities with instant advised remediation actions. The next step is Crypto Radar, an in-depth internal vulnerability testing capability. This will highlight any infrastructure and software vulnerabilities. Crypto Radar has a deep web scan capability to identify public information on any business assets. All this actionable data is collated and added to the final Cobra report. The final phase is Crypto DNA, a dark net analytics scan, which runs a reputational threat analysis produced from multiple social media platforms, discovering potential data leakage, counterfeit goods, Contraband, stolen intellectual property, other threat indicators of compromise. Reputation is everything. On collation of all phases, the intelligence is delivered in an easy-to-understand report with instant feedback regarding any vulnerabilities found, and action needed to be taken to remediate the issues. A risk score will be assigned to the business, giving an indication of the organization's overall cyber resilience. Traditional security testing is often expensive, and it may take weeks for you to receive the results. With Cobra, you will receive immediate feedback on your potential exposure to cyber threats that could be exploited by hackers. To understand your organization's threat exposure, contact CryptoCloud to book your Cobra today. CryptoCloud, security made simple.
Thanks, Graham. As you can see there, Cobra provides you with a really detailed understanding of your organisation's strengths and vulnerabilities. And I think it's important to reassure you that it takes up to 2 hours of your time. That'll be your specialist IT staff time. And it takes about 2 to 3 days of our time. But it acts as the perfect starting point from which you can plan the actions that you need to take to keep your college safe. We all know that prevention is better than cure, and the reality of a breach is that your staff, students, stakeholders, media outlets will be saying things like you're seeing on the screen now. And it is highly stressful because, as ever, as the pandemic's proven, we don't know how it will feel until we're actually in that position and then dealing with those unexpected outcomes. And that's absolutely what we want to avoid, for your sake and the sake of your staff and of your students. We are at CryptoCloud experienced at supporting HE and FE providers. Our team equally understands the challenges of education and of cybersecurity. And so we've actually created a bespoke offer for education partners to provide you with a very cost-effective package of cyber support. If you'd like to know more, I will be sharing our contact details after the Q&A, so we'd really love you to get in touch. We're always available to offer advice and support and to give you kind of pointers in directions that you might need to develop your cybersecurity. So thank you ever so much for listening to us this morning. My colleague, or our CEO at CryptoCloud, Paul Burrows, is also on the call with Graham and I. We'll be opening the floor to questions. If you have any, you want to pop them into the chat box, that would be fantastic. Thanks very much. Looks like we're all good. No questions yet.
Either that, or she did such a good job, Graham and Rona, that there are no questions from anyone.
Graham, is there anything that you didn't mention that we can talk about now for these last couple of minutes of the slot, in case anyone's still listening?
Yeah, I think we did cover the point, but for me, it's something that does often get overlooked. It is the extent to which, at the most senior levels in the organisation, that this sort of thing does get visibility and does get airtime in ELT and BOR, because it means that cybersecurity, it can be a scary area. It's deeply complex, and even the technical experts in the IT teams will not be able to understand all of the technical concepts and issues that a dedicated cyber team, like the one at CryptoCloud will have. But somebody needs to bridge the gap and break it down so that at a leadership level, you can get a handle on your maturity in this respect, how safe you are, what things you need to close down, what the priorities are. So answering those questions and having an audit and knowing where you are and which things you can address really quickly, because typically there are some changes you can make. Obviously our experience was not normal, because we implemented advanced threat protection as we were recovering from a cyber attack, and that's not an ideal time, but B, it really focuses everyone's attention. So we did it in a matter of days, and I wouldn't advise that it was done that quickly, but it does go to show that if you haven't got an advanced threat protection capability and you identify through an audit or through asking those questions that you really need one, it can be done quickly, and it should be done quickly if it's not in place.
Yeah, I think talking to colleges now at the moment, finding, we have a question just appeared. How did Lincoln College get senior stakeholders on board?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So at Lincoln College, I'm the Group Director of IT and Information Management, and I have a position on the executive leadership team. So the technology and information is directly represented at the senior leadership team level within the college, and it is something that gets discussed. So obviously I report direct to the CEO, so it gets discussed in our one-to-ones. We cover the subject at ELT. We had a cyber briefing not long ago, and we will have them regularly. So it's just by having representation on the most senior places in the organisation is how you will embed it in the executive leadership team and at board level.
I've just noticed there's a question here on first steps to starting out getting a handle on cybersecurity. Yeah, I think the audit that we talked about, that Cobra tool that we offer at CryptoCloud, is a great starting point, because in order to truly understand the potential risks and vulnerabilities, you do need an external expert to come in and have a look at systems. And I would always suggest going on reputation and recommendation, because it is how we tend to find out which businesses we feel confident in and we can trust. So we work with Lincoln College, and we always work with Graham to talk about the services that we offer, and there are other businesses that do likewise, but we believe that Cobra gives you the best starting point to understand where the potential risks are and where to start, because you could spend tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds supporting your college infrastructure, and we need to just make sure that what you're choosing to spend balances your risk appetite and the money available. So we appreciate there's a very careful balance. And the investment in terms of time and money to understand a typical college's IT resilience. Paul, do you want to pick up on that?
Okay, so if I'm seeing the question, it said, what would be the investment in terms of time and money to understand a typical college's IT resilience? So IT resilience, cyber resilience, business resilience, to me, they're all part of the same question. As we keep saying, you can only fix what you can identify as an issue or as a problem, and it's a journey. So going back to what Graham said before, when Lincoln College were breached, there was no, for instance, advanced threat protection capability in place. That's really should be the end of the journey. If you're looking about the IT resilience or the business resilience, then from the top, from the senior leadership, from senior stakeholders buy-in, to the IT teams, to the central management, that process, that journey has to be undertaken. When we bring on any new client, we will always do some kind of business risk audit. We either do the full audit or a broken down audit, but whatever we do, we have to try and come to some point of recommendation, some point of start point, where we can then recommend what process should be taken. From an investment perspective, from a Cobra, we could offer a Cobra Lite for all AOC members for free. Okay, so that's just reaching out to me, Graham, or Rona, and we can provide you with a link where you can do a really, really high level Cobra. The in-depth Cobra that you saw on the video requires more time, more investment, but it's a really, really good start point. So whatever your requirements are, not every two colleges are the same. We're currently talking to about 21 different colleges for our capabilities and our services that we've seen within the further education sector. We like deal across multiple sectors, but there's not one size fits all. So again, from an individual college perspective, you just reach out to us and then we can tailor that and help you down that journey path.
Okay, so I've got a couple of questions to pick up. There was a question about what would I include in the ring fence security budget. So the sort of things I would include in there are certainly a very comprehensive cyber insurance policy. I would include all of the purchase and the running costs and the annual on cost for an advanced threat protection capability. I would include the cost for a enterprise strength antivirus capability, although a lot of that might be picked up in your existing MS Campus agreement. I would certainly include the cost for an enterprise strength backup system, which is very, very different from the sort of free backups that you can get. They're worlds apart, but the backup is key, because if failing everything else, that is what you will need to come back to. So certainly enterprise grade backup, and lastly, but certainly not least, an investment in staff, because you will need, even if you partner with a cybersecurity partner, you're going to need some cybersecurity expertise on site to deal with all the intelligence that flows out of the monitoring systems, and certainly staff training and awareness. Get your staff educated so they don't fall foul of basic phishing attempts and things like that. So those are the sorts of things I would include in the ring-fenced budget. So I've also got a question: what was the root cause of the attack? Did it start from phishing? Well, the group that attacked us, their modus operandi and their specialism is exploiting remote desktop platforms. So sort of in the COVID era, colleges are finding ways to give remote access directly to the desktop computing experience to people that are sat in their homes, and that involves a technology called remote desktop protocol, and that was the exploit. That's how they got in. It's very difficult to tell the exact minute detail of how they exploited that. It might have been, as explained in the presentation, it might have been they stole a password, guessed a password. They might have enrolled as a student and been sent a password. But once they got onto remote desktop, that is this group's attack vector. They get on through remote desktop, and then they look to widen their access out from there. So I think I picked up all the questions in the chat.
Yeah, the earlier question about getting senior stakeholders on board, I have been working with a number of colleges where I've started conversations with their IT teams, and then offered to meet with senior leaders and to almost share both sides of the story, in the sense of from an IT perspective and from a cybersecurity perspective. So we're always really happy to come and offer any support that's needed. If any staff want us to talk with them, with their senior teams, we'd be more than happy to. Graham, I think if you want to flick onto the next slide, there's our contact details, so that if anyone wants to get in touch with any of the three of us, our details are all here, and you can link through to our CryptoCloud website, where you can find further information and the video that was shown today.
Final bit from me, Rona and Graham, would be a quick question on cybersecurity insurance. We can't emphasize enough that if you can go to a specialist cyber insurance provider, then you will get more in-depth cover than having generic cyber insurance as part of normal business insurance. Okay, so you should have all your policies really inspected, because this could come and bite you on the backside when the time needs for you to claim on it.
So we used a company called Travelers that do a specialist cybersecurity. I can feedback that I got a good level of service from them throughout, and they appointed a legal team from a separate company called Kennedy's Law, who again specialise in cyber, and I got a really good service there. So there's lots of them out there. That's one that certainly worked well for us when we needed it.
Super. I think we're about to cut off, so thanks very much, gentlemen.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thanks for listening. Any questions after the event, please feel free to get in touch.